Hi everyone. In this lesson, I'll demonstrate how a method can take another method as an argument and why you'd want that. We'll start by looking at this code that takes in an array 3, 2, 1 and adds 1 to each element, so we'll get 4, 3, 2 as the output. Okay, so imagine you were asked to change this code so that it can add either 1 or 2 to the array. Well, the most obvious thing to do is change the 1 here on line 4 to the variable n, which now needs to be a new parameter that we'll have to pass in when we call add1. Okay, that works. We want to rename add1, of course, to something else. And let's call it now with 2 as an argument. Yep, so that worked. So nothing new so far. Let's go back. And now imagine you're asked to change this code again so that it can either add 1 or multiply by 2 to each element of the array. So the problem is we need somehow to have a variable that can contain either x plus 1 here or x times 2. And it's not obvious how to do that. Can we pass in maybe x plus 1 here as a second argument? Well, no, that doesn't work because x isn't defined outside the add1 method. Also, the adding or multiplying is only happening once on line 10, if we did it there, and we want the adding or multiplying to happen 3 times, once for each number of the array. So that won't work. We can get closer to the solution by making a new method with just x plus 1 inside it. Let's call it plus 1. And we'll test it, make sure it works. Plus 1 of 7 is 8. Great. So now, how can we pass in this plus 1 method to the add1 method so that we can call the plus 1 method later? Can we just write plus 1 here and then receive a method f and call f of x? That looks like it will work. It won't quite work because we'll get an argument error. And the reason is, on line 13, even though we're just trying to mention the plus 1 method, we're actually calling it accidentally. Even though we don't have parentheses after it or any arguments, it's still thinking we're trying to call the plus 1 method right there in line 13. We're trying to wait until line 4 to call it. So we're stuck. However, there is a way to mention a method without actually calling it. And that's to call the method method. We'll pass the symbol plus 1 to this method, and it'll give us a proc object. Proc is short for procedure. That wraps up the plus 1 method. So the f variable here will now contain a proc object which we can call with the call method, like this. So that works. So let's rename add1 to something more generic since it's not just adding anymore. How about repeat? And we can create a times 2 method and test that out. So that works. Again, the repeat method is taking the proc object and calling it. And that's an example of functional programming.